Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another event with Cliptus. Thanks very much for joining us. Quick reminder, we are Web3's gamified hiring platform, helping people all over the world find jobs in the space and supporting some of the very best employers in our industry. Today, we are diving into the very exciting world of Web3 careers with the founder of My Code Career and head of engineering at Celestia, Matt Sevey. It's all about helping you to thrive in Web3, whether you're shifting over from traditional tech, sharpening your skills through education, or exploring new jobs. We will hopefully provide you with lots of actionable insights from an industry leader to help you level up and stand out. We have a whole bunch of questions prepared, but we will be coming to audience questions a little bit later on. So please do put your questions in the chat wherever you're watching this. With that, let's kick off. Matt, it would be great to get a bit of an introduction from you before we dive into some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Callum. Great to be here. So a little bit about me, my background. So I've been in the Web3 space since 2018. I've joined the Sia blockchain project back there, working in decentralized data storage. Found the Celestia team back in 2021, and really excited to join that team and help them launch the first modular blockchain network. Alongside it, ever since I kind of broke into the space, because I came from a background of actually mechanical engineering. So for any people out there watching that have a non-traditional background, not CS degree or kind of switching from other careers, I switched into the space back then, breaking into the software at the same time, and since then really enjoyed helping people make that switch as well, figure out how to find themselves in their new career and really level up. And that's what we do through my work at My Code Career, helping people level up their skills both via the job search or internal to your company, and really understanding how to get the career that you want.
Awesome, and you do a great job of it. We work with Matt on a few fronts, so can definitely vouch for his skills on that front. And talking of skills, kicking off, would love to start just by talking a bit about, I suppose, what skills in Web3 hold the highest value. How can candidates either keep up or develop those skills and stand out to employers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in an industry like Web3 that's still relatively new compared to other industries and changing a lot, I think the kind of meta skill of learning is probably one of the best skills to be cultivating, right? Understanding kind of how you learn and why you like to learn and what you do well at is going to be something that really accelerates your career, because we can talk about the current technologies that are used across companies, from coding skills like Golang or Rust or Solidity or JavaScript, languages that are being used at companies, but those could change, right? As if we looked 5 years ago, right, like Rust was way less known, right? But now, especially with ZK, Rust is exploding and really getting a lot of recognition in the space for a top skill to have. And so having that meta skill of being able to learn new skills, new technologies, new languages to kind of keep up with the space is definitely something that people, really should have at the forefront. It's not learn one thing and then you're done. It's like how do keep learning and focus on being an active participant, in the space, seeing what trends are coming, what skills you need to have to help propel the project that you're at, further into the space and kind of bring yourself along with it.
For sure, agree. I think being a good learner in a space that moves this fast is absolutely vitally important. And then, yeah, if you're technical, programming languages like Solidity, Rust, Go, they're always going to be helpful. And there's lots of content out there to help you learn those. And I think I'd just add, contributing wherever you can, whether that's open source projects, whether that's engaging in communities or DAOs. Those are all things that you can do that hold really high value for people interviewing in the space. I guess, Matt, beyond technical know-how, what soft skills make a candidate truly stand out?
I think some of the soft skills that really help people stand out building on what you just said around kind of open source, really leans into the kind of networking and communication side of things, right? In a community and ecosystem that's really values open source contribution, right? There's a lot of and a lot of like remote work. Communications are really, it's an important skill anywhere, but especially in Web3, like being able to communicate effectively across various platforms in a very remote, distributed, ecosystem with people all over the world, right? A lot of communication with different people where English is not their native language, right? Or kind of being able to handle those different types of communication styles well is something that's really, really valuable. And so working in that open source field, being able to communicate well verbally, communicate well written, communicate well in your code, all those are different forms of communication, and understanding how to, work in that type of environment where there's lots of different time zones and cultures and different kind of like ethics like around all those things, really are some of the soft skills that help like stand out and allow people to really accelerate and do well in this space.
Definitely. Yeah. I think by our last count, about 80% of roles in the space are remote first. So communication, definitely, I think, number one. Collaboration kind of coming alongside that. And for me as well, adaptability. There's so much ambiguity in this space. You're often working on your own. You might be in the one person working in your location, and being able to adapt quickly to that ambiguity, to the problems that come up, super, super important. So if you're going to an interview, have some examples ready to talk about how you do that. And we've spoken already, and I expect we'll speak about it a fair amount more. How can candidates use personal projects or open source contributions to boost their credibility in the space?
Yeah, I think personal projects in the open source is one of the things that make, I think, Web3 such a great ecosystem and community and space to work in, especially for people trying to break into space either from Web 2 or trying to break into the space from just like a different career entirely. If we look at personal projects in the Web 2 context, a lot of the times that's someone making their own to-do list app or their own tracking app, or like something that is pretty copy paste, like you've seen it in tutorials over and over and over again. Where in the Web3 space, and I think taking it even a step further in the Web 2 space, like for example, if you think about like Amazon or Google and like trying to like get into a company like that, like you can't just access their code. You can't just like build a Google server, right? Whereas in the Web3 space, because it's all open source, you can see the code, you can use the code, you can build, you run the nodes, you can really be a Web3 developer today. Just anyone can do that, right? Because all the code is open source. You can deploy your own smart contracts. You can run your own nodes. You can build your own applications. You don't need that permission to like get inside the company to like see the source code to be able to do those things. That's one of the great things about open source. And so I think in the Web3 context, it's not even really like personal projects. It's really just starting to build your open source portfolio of like what's the work that you have done? What projects have you created forks of their code base to like submit PRs or do things? So you can actually just start doing the work, right? Creating that experience that is building your skills and also building experience that hiring companies are looking for, right? So I think the main difference for me when I think about that stuff between Web 2 and Web 3 is that in Web 2, like it really is like personal projects, kind of like small tutorial type stuff, whereas in Web3 you can actually just use production code. You can build production applications. You don't need to get into the company to start doing that.
100%. I agree. It's one of the amazing things about this space. So much of it is open source, and you can just dive right in. And if you're not technical, that doesn't matter either. I think there's so much opportunity within communities, whether it's writing tutorials, basic tutorials, and using that to build credibility and create trust with employers and people in the industry. What do you think, Matt, is a habit or a skill that everyone on this call today should be looking to develop to stay competitive or be competitive in interview processes?
I think one habit that goes across the board is that staying up to date with the industry, like that kind of habit of seeing what other projects are out there, learning about different competitors to a project or something like that. Because regardless of what your position is, whether it's technical or non-technical, you can look at it from that lens, right? If you're on the technical side of things, you can look at, hey, what are the differences and how, their tech stack, like how are they choosing to solve this problem from a technical standpoint, and compare projects that way. From a non-technical standpoint, it's like, hey, how are they positioning themselves in the space? Like, how are they positioning themselves as thought leaders or market leaders, like in this space, and how are they compared to others? So in a space that's moving so quickly and there's new projects, new integrations, new announcements almost daily, right? Having that habit of figuring out like what it means for you to like stay up to date in that industry then allows you to stay competitive, because you can be able to see and think about what might a company be experienced in terms of challenges or like next steps, right? If you're interviewing with a company and being able to know what their competitors are, what they're doing, how the space is kind of moving, you'll be able to answer questions in a lot more thoughtful way and really come across as a very strong candidate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd double down on that for sure. Experiment with emerging protocols and tools, contribute to communities. I think those are really clear ways to stand out and can always be developed. I know certainly from our standpoint at Calyptus, we've been seeing huge growth over the last few months, thousands of new users on our platform looking for work every single week. I guess a lot of those people are transitioning from the world of traditional tech into this space. A lot of these people don't have Web3 experience yet. So how would you suggest that they can frame their past experience to resonate with hiring managers in this space?
Yeah, great question. And I'm glad you said to kind of frame their experience, because a lot of the times it's not about needing to get new experience. It's about understanding how to frame and talk about your current experience in a way that is now applicable to this new space, right? So if there are clear experience or knowledge gaps, right, we can go back to what we talked around open source contributions, being able to contribute to projects, build on protocols. That's a way to tangibly like close knowledge gaps or experience gaps on your resume. A lot of the times, though, it's about recognizing just the different kind of paradigms between the space. And I'll go into that by talking about an example of someone that I had worked with a couple of years ago, where they were coming from the Web2 space, trying to break into the Web3 space. They had, 5+ years experience as a full stack developer in the Web2 space. Really knowledgeable developer. But when you looked at their experience, it just read as really traditional Web2 full stack dev, right? Which, when viewed from a Web3 lens, like that's just not applicable experience. However, when you start asking them questions, kind of digging in to say, tell me about what this full stack experience meant to you, turns out that most of that experience was with Golang based distributed backends, right? And when you think about Golang distributed backends, like that is Web3. So many projects use Golang and work on distributed systems. And so it was just about recognizing the different kind of talking points between the industries and just restructuring his resume and his LinkedIn to highlight that experience, right? And pretty much overnight, he went from almost never hearing back from applications to like consistently hearing back from applications, because now he was talking about his experience in a way that made sense to these new hiring managers.
Great example. That is definitely the ideal experience. Someone with Golang building distributed systems. That's perfect. Cool. And if someone perhaps has minimal experience but is really passionate about the space, are there any quick wins to get noticed by hiring managers, would you say?
I think when you have that kind of limited experience, but you got that passion. I think lean into that as a way to really just dive in and start building, start using, find the that niche within the industry that you're really excited about, right? Whether it's that smart contract development, whether it's the protocols in the back end, whether it's marketing, like end user applications, whatever it might be, and find those projects that really align with it, and just go down the rabbit hole. Really try and think about, how do I engage with this community and like build that experience and really build my network around this. I've seen countless examples of people finding projects that they're super excited about and just going all in, super active on the Discord, trying to submit PRs or helping improve the docs, like being an active user. And the team recognizes that, they see that, and then when roles pop up, they're like, this person is like already been using it, like they're already super psyched about the protocol and everything. Why don't we try and just bring them into the team? So use that passion and excitement and to your advantage, and find those projects that you can kind of just insert yourself into the community and kind of become that power user, become that kind of key community member, so that you're top of mind when the team is looking to hire.
Definitely. And we have personal experience doing that. One of our more recent employees was a community member first and foremost, and was just incredibly impressive as a community member. So as soon as we had a job role open, naturally they were the first person we reached out to. I think I'd also add, hackathons are quite big in this space. Definitely try and go to hackathons. Again, you don't need to be technical to participate in those. You can also earn certifications from all sorts of Web3 platforms, Calyptus included, by the way. And yeah, just again, doubling down on the social presence side of things. Be active on socials and in Discords and things like that. In terms of then, I suppose, hiring practices and the difference between tech startups and Web3 startups, how would you say that they differ right now?
I think at the startup level, there's not a ton of differences. I think that a lot of the differences you see in hiring really comes with size of the org. And so, but if some of the differences that are present between the two are in Web3, again, we've said it a number of times already, like that social profile that you have, right? Like whether you're active on Twitter, whether you're active on GitHub as a developer, I see Web3 companies really valuing that and looking for that, and asking for that kind of in the application. It's like, hey, show me do you have a Twitter profile? Do you have a GitHub profile? Like, what do you have? Show me how you're active in the space. And I see that a lot more in Web3 than in Web2. And I think Web2 is more used to closed source type of development and kind of siloed products and things like that. And so they mostly just they're going to look at your resume, they're going to look at your LinkedIn, and then make a decision. Whereas in Web3, because it's a much more active and engaged and social and open ecosystem, that lends itself to be looking at like what those social profiles look like for people, so that they can really get a much better sense of who you are in the space, and how you'd fit on the team.
Yeah, great answer. I think one thing I've noticed as well is perhaps more of a prioritization of passion and cultural fit over traditional credentials. I think, again, back to the remote-led nature of this industry, we need people who are kind of intrinsically motivated and want to work in this space and will work hard and will be adaptable. So I think there's definitely kind of a skew towards that passion, and again, back to open source contributions and talking in communities, really. I think we had a question in the chat from Adam a little while ago, and hopefully this next question will go some way, at least to answering that. But how do you build credibility in Web3? And what role does networking play in that? in Web3 job hunting?
Mm-hmm. The Yeah, so seeing some of his questions pop up on the screen here as well. Great question. So the role that networking, I think, plays in Web3 and the job search broadly is that by and large, roles are filled through networks. I think there's multiple studies out there that show that upwards of like 11 out of 12 roles are filled by some sort of network connection, right? Whether it's a direct referral, whether it's an internal hire, something like that. And so if you are not actively building your network, you are doing your career a disservice in terms of your ability to like find opportunities and be exposed to opportunities, right? So as a baseline, having a network is hugely important. How you actually kind of go and implement that in the Web3 space is, you've got a lot of options. So we talked about the open source side of things, and with that comes the community aspect of these projects, right? And so contributing to, as a developer, contributing to open source, submitting PRs, like that is a form of networking. Like that is a form of kind of like building your online kind of GitHub presence with these other communities so they can see the work that you're doing, right? Additionally, getting involved with those communities, whether it's Telegram groups, whether it's Discord servers, and engaging there, becoming known, like that is a form of networking. That is a form of kind of remote networking, right? The Web3 industry is also, as Callum mentioned, like big on hackathons, right? Hackathons are another big networking opportunity, right? To meet other people, join small teams, and again, get your presence known there. And often alongside of hackathons are just general conference events, right? I think conferences in the Web3 space are still really, really powerful and impactful and engage. There's, I think, probably conferences and a lot of other industries are a little bit might be a little bit stuffier in terms of feeling a little bit more old school, a little bit like I'm not sure like how to use this as a networking event type of thing. Feels very kind of like salesy and transactional. In the Web3 space, so much of the conference space is just really passionate around learning, presenting new ideas, topics, and people are they're generally excited to share their knowledge, share their experience, see what other people are doing. And so it's a really kind of networking positive kind of experience at those conferences. So kind of to summarize there's the balance of remote networking, right? Whether that's on GitHub, whether that's on Telegram, whether it's on Discord. And then there's still the possibility for in-person networking through hackathons and conferences in the space. Was there another part of that question that I missed? Again, it was kind of a multi-part question there.
It was a bit, wasn't it? No, I thought you covered it very well. I think it's a balance of both, isn't it, to maximize your opportunities. Zooming in a bit more on those trying to network, what's a good way to reach out to someone who's working in Web3? Do you have any advice there?
I think the general advice around reaching out to anyone with regard to networking is to be intentional with like what your goal is, right? And it should always be kind of value driven and kind of knowledge sharing driven, and those are going to have the most kind of positive and kind of the biggest return on investment and the best response rate. So whether that's we'll start with the we talked a lot about technical. So from a non-technical side, right? If it's reaching out to someone in marketing or strategy and just like picking their brain about like, hey, like I love what you've done with your project. Like love how you positioned yourself as a market leader. Like I would love to like ask you some questions about like how you did that, right? Like what are some things you think like worked well for you, right? And really trying to position that person as like the authority figure that they are, and looking for just help and just like understanding like, hey, how's it going? I think a lot of the people try to, or not necessarily try, they're inadvertently link networking requests with job asks, right? And that's not what networking is, right? Yes, jobs can come from networking, but like networking should be founded on the idea of like building meaningful connections, right? And if you build meaningful connections, you are then building your network, and then jobs, opportunities, career growth, like that will happen as a product of a strong network. But if all you're doing is reaching out to people to be like, hey, I'm interested in space. Do you have any jobs for me? Right. Even the most well-meaning people, myself included, are mostly just going to be like, I don't have time for this. Right. And so there's because people that are known in the space have a lot of people reaching out to them all the time for that. And so even if they want to help people, there's just not enough time in the day. And so they're going to prioritize things that they see as valuable, and helping to kind of like coach and mentor someone about the space is just more valuable in the long run than sending someone potentially a job description that they don't know. Right. So
For
when
sure.
you're networking, really focus on building that connection, building that relationship, and then just trust that opportunities will come in the future.
Definitely. Yeah. From personal experience, it's definitely keeping communication concise and action oriented. Make sure that what you're asking for, or what you're looking for, is clear, but you're providing something else to them, even if it is as simple as, I saw your post on this and thought this. That shows that you've put in a level of effort that a lot of people won't have, and makes you stand out. And for you, Matt, what's the role of community building in a Web3 career? How can it impact your professional growth?
Yeah, I think in the context of like networking and career growth, your community is kind of like your nuclear network, right? It's like what's my career community? Like what community am I kind of niching down to and like understanding and learning about and knowing how to position myself as an authority figure, and so people know me. And so part of that, you know, when thinking through the lens of community, kind of takes it a step further than just like a network connection, right? Thinking about LinkedIn is like a great example. Like how many, first degree connections do you have on LinkedIn? How many of those people do you actually know? How many people do you actually have like a conversation history with, right? And so I would say like the people that you have a conversation history with are closer to your actual community, right? And that might be, I don't know, 5% of your actual LinkedIn, connection, right? And so thinking about it the same way with building a network in Web3 is, who are the people, the projects, the skills and technologies that you're focusing your time and energy on, that you can then come back to reach out to people that you have questions with because you've talked to them in the past. Like you have that history of talking to them about topics, talking about projects, meeting up at hackathons, meeting up at conferences, like all of that.
For sure. Yeah, second your point on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think again, back to just being involved in community means that you're visible a lot more. You have a lot more opportunities to learn. You build trust and reputation within the industry, and naturally doors will open to jobs, to mentorship, to collaborations if you're already in the industry. So a huge amount of opportunity in building a community. I want to kind of finish off these questions around how people can actually find jobs in this space. So, what are some go-to strategies that you would recommend for finding Web3 jobs?
I'd say number one strategy is joining Cliptus. That would be like number one strategy that I recommend
Gosh,
recommend to people. The I think finding, before we kind of dive into like the specific strategies of like how you're going to find jobs, and using amazing platforms like Cliptus, is making sure that you're clear on what you want, right? I would say the most common challenge that I see people having when they're in the job search and having a hard time finding opportunities is that they're just looking for a job, and like that is as specific as they have gotten. And the reality is, everyone, you, me, everyone on this call, is underqualified for more opportunities than they are qualified for. And so when you're just looking for a job and you're looking at all of those opportunities, you're going to hit all of these positions that you're just not qualified for. And it's not that, you should take that as a bad thing. It's just that you should figure out how to just never see those opportunities in the first place, right? So that you're then spending more time finding the roles that you're actually qualified for, and you can spend more time finding those roles and interviewing for those roles. One of the ways that you kind of then do that is doing the upfront work of getting clear on what is this next role that I'm looking for? How does it fit into my career that I'm trying to have? And defining that very specifically, right? Because then once you get the specifics of, whether it's a specific title, specific industry, specific company, specific technology, specific, seniority, like when you start defining all of those, then it becomes much easier to actually start finding those roles because you have a really clear target about what you're looking for. So then when you come to platforms like Calyptus, you're like, I'm looking for this specific thing because of this is my background, it's then pretty easy to find those opportunities, right? Because you have a very clear goal. But if you're just I'm looking for a job, right? There's, I don't know how many thousands of jobs listed on Calyptus, right? There's a bunch of jobs, but like, doesn't mean that anyone going to that platform is necessarily qualified for any of those jobs, right? Because you got to be specific about what you're looking for. And so get specific, have that specific goal. So then when you are using, platforms or your network, you have a specific ask that you're looking for. And you can then use that also to filter away things that are not a good fit. And that ultimately saves you time and makes things go a lot faster because you're not wasting time on opportunities that ultimately were never going to work out.
I think that's fantastic advice. And not just because you mentioned Calyptus about 5 times. Yeah, I think there's lots of platforms out there. Once you have done that work to figure out what you are great at and where you will be most valuable to a company or a project, there's platforms like Calyptus, but you can also leverage, again, social media, Twitter, Discord, to find kind of more informal job leads. You can look for bounty programs or part-time contributions to Web3 projects. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and once you've done that first step of figuring out where you're going to be most helpful and where your skills will land you great roles, get to it. There's tons of spaces you can look.
Something I wanted to add to that too is
Yeah.
To kind of illustrate the importance of being specific and how it relates to kind of different size companies, right? So if you're applying for larger companies in the space like Coinbase or Chainlink or something like that, they're larger companies, been around for a while. They're going to have more specific titles and responsibilities, right? Because they've had more time to define what exactly it is they need. If you're trying to get into a startup, early on, 10 people, 5 people, 20 people, like, something that's pretty small, often you'll find that they have a kind of pain point or need that they recognize, but they don't necessarily have the role super defined. And so by having a very defined role for yourself, if you have conversations with those teams, it can actually help you kind of solidify the job for them and place you as like the solution for that, right? And I kind of that was actually something that I did with my last role, is that I was very clear in terms of like what I was looking for, and that helped kind of solidify what the job title and responsibilities would look like with the team, and so that it ended up being a really good fit when I joined. So having that specificity allows you to take on and secure opportunities that might not even really been available publicly, because the team was still trying to figure out and articulate what it is they were looking for. So get specific, be clear in what you want. It only benefits you in the long run.
Cool. And what unconventional methods have you seen people use to get noticed by Web3 employers? Has anyone done anything unconventional and caught your attention, Matt?
I think the most I have a hard time calling it unconventional because I've seen it happen so many times now. But like from like a developer perspective, just like basically just inserting yourself as a developer in the community and like submitting pull requests and like just like learning the protocol and like taking on harder and harder issues, like just like almost forces the team to hire you sometimes. So,
Mhm.
there's on both projects that I've worked on in the space, like that has happened with some of the stronger developers that are on the team. Like they found the project, got super excited about it, just started contributing and like contributed super high, like, pretty, technical pull requests that are, you'd expect someone on the team to be handling. And people are just like, we just need to like hire this person because they're so good. And I've seen it even go to the extreme where someone applied for a role, got rejected because the team didn't think they had enough experience. And the person just kind of, to some extent, rejected that rejection and just started contributing to the project and basically got the team to be like, okay, maybe you are actually as good as you say you are, and let's hire you, right? And so and I know that's very specific to kind of software engineering roles, but the idea of using this open source, very public, interconnected ecosystem to essentially, again, just do the job today that you're looking for, and you know kind of do first, ask for permission later type of thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes really just helps kind of like insert yourself into the project in a way that gets you noticed and gets you hired.
Cool. Yeah, perhaps not too unconventional anymore, but
Yeah.
a really great way to stand out.
Mhm.
Um, so then, coming on to talking about kind of preparation and interview strategies, how should a candidate prepare for an interview? Are there any particular questions that you would suggest that they ask at the end of that interview?
Mhm. Yeah, in terms of questions to ask at the end, I think that comes back to the getting specific about what you're looking for, right? Because when you're
Mhm.
specific about what you're looking for, you should be thinking about the job title and role itself, but also, the responsibilities, the compensation, like all that stuff. So then if you're defining that ahead of time about the specifics that you want, those should be the questions that you're trying to ask in the interviews to like make sure that you're aligned, right?
Mhm.
I think balancing those questions, which are usually very kind of self-driven, kind of selfish questions of like, do you have this, do you have this, do you have this type of thing, trying to think about how you ask them in a way that is engaging to the interviewer and asking their experience. A great example there in terms of how to kind of go deeper on questions is the kind of culture question, right? A lot of times people will generically ask, tell me about the culture, right? And uh, I might have a unpopular opinion, but I think that's a terrible question to ask. And specifically just in that format, because culture is everything. And so culture is different for everybody. And so when you ask the question, tell me about the culture, you're going to get that person's interpretation of what is important to them in terms of the culture, because that's what they're going to focus on. And so then you're at the mercy of, does that person have the same focus on culture that I do?
Mhm.
And so if you're asking the question, tell me about the culture, typically it's because you have something specific about culture that you're looking for, in which case you should just ask that question specifically, right? And so maybe it's, I'm looking for a culture of growth and opportunity and, being able to like level up my performance and things like that. So instead of saying, tell me about the culture and hoping the interviewer says something about growth and performance and all that, you should ask the question to the interviewer, like, tell me about how the team has supported like your growth while you've been at the company, right? And if they can talk about that in detail, then that tells you that there's a culture of growth at that company. But if they're like, not really sure, like haven't really talked about it with my manager ever, it's like probably there's not a culture of growth and opportunity at the company. Um, in terms of like other ways to prepare for the interview past just the questions, there's uh, if you go online, you're going to find endless lists of like common questions that are asked during an interview. At the end of the day, all these questions are asking about your experience. So even though there might be a bunch of different questions that might be asked, ultimately it's one kind of answer set, which is your experience. And so for you preparing for the interview, you want to be very comfortable about talking in depth about your experience And so then you just have to know how to relate questions to the experience that you want to highlight. So to make that in a more explicit example, if we think about your resume, we put on our resume our key achievements for a role, right? And we want to highlight those because those are our key experiences. So then if someone asks me a question about, tell me about a project you work on, tell me about a challenging relationship, tell me about competing priorities, tight deadlines, all this stuff, those are just the specifics that I need to pull out from those key accomplishments that I already listed, right? And so I should be able to talk about all of those key accomplishments as from the lens of people I worked with, priorities, timelines, blockers, bugs. If you can hit all of those points on your experience from your resume, then you're going to be able to answer kind of any questions they throw at you in terms of examples from your past. And so that's a really good way to then simplify the preparation process, because it's not preparing unique answers for all these different questions. It's just getting really comfortable talking about your experience from a bunch of different perspectives.
For sure. And I think I would also just add to that, don't forget to research the company, their mission, what's online about them, the social profiles of the interviewers. Do that work, because you will get found out, and if you're applying for a role, they're going to want to see that you've put the effort in and you're excited to work with them. It's always a shame when people haven't done that work, and you don't want to be wasting someone's time. Final question from us then, before we come to some audience questions. And this is a really interesting one, I think, in this space where there are so many buzzwords. How can candidates effectively convey that they are knowledgeable about the space or a programming language without kind of playing that buzzword bingo type game?
Great question. I think a little bit of it depends on the role. There's, for non-technical roles like marketing or product strategy or things like that, you might need to lean into some more of the kind of buzzwordy type, highlights that are on the top of the news feed today to like show that you are up to date with like how the community is talking, right? So if so leaning into that a little bit to make sure that you're communicating that, yeah, like I understand where the market is, where the ecosystem is, how are people talking about this technology versus that technology. And then similarly for more technical roles, being able to understand how that project talks about a technology, and in both instances being able to go like one layer deeper, right? And so you might say buzzword, 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 which is ultimately kind of using the Cosmos SDK underneath, right? Buzzword, 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 buzzword. These are also like L1s in the space, right? And so being able to go a level deeper, to show that you know what these buzzwords are actually talking about under the hood and like how they are related, and ultimately how that relates to the role or the project that you're interviewing with. Oh, you're still muted, Callum.
It was going to catch me at one point, wasn't it? I was just saying, I think it's all about giving specific answers, being clear, being concise, and more like case studies as opposed to kind of just general waffly statements. Mm-hmm. I think we'll just spend the next couple of minutes answering some questions in the comments. I can see Franklin asked, and this is design specific, Matt, what key skills do you think Web3 designers should focus on to stand out in this rapidly evolving space?
Yeah, I think something we talked about in the beginning was that kind of like meta skill of learning and being up to date with like industry standards, right? And I think a good way to maybe make that more actionable is to focus on what are the key problems in the space and what are ways to solve that, right? And so if you can stay up to date on like what are the key problems, then how you solve that is going to then be that kind of course correcting direction of like, what skills do I need to know in order to solve this problem, right? And so whether it's from a design perspective, really talking about like end users, what are some of the biggest end user pain points that are in the space right now? How are people solving that today? What skills are they using to solve those problems? That's a good way to then make sure that your kind of skills are up to date with the problems that we're trying to solve, right? Um, and making sure that you then have the reason to like learn the skill, right?
I think what I would say, just on more on standing out as opposed to the skills side, is back to what we've mentioned a lot already, is kind of just contributing. Build a new design for their marketing, build a new design for their product. It doesn't need to be pixel perfect, but get something out there that shows that you're thinking about this problem or a solution really deeply, and put it in front of someone, and you're bound to stand out just from doing that extra work. Are there any more questions at all? I'm not. Okay, from Tanvi, how to verify or authorize blockchain companies before applying for the role? It's a good question. There are a lot, if I'm understanding it correctly, there are a lot of perhaps unscrupulous companies or projects in the space. I think, yeah, there's perhaps Matt, I'll throw over to you first.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of with any emerging ecosystem and technology, there's always going to be those companies that are not as honorable or ethical than others. And something, unfortunately, that I've seen kind of not even just the blockchain industry, but kind of across the hiring kind of market, as you will, is an increase in kind of hiring scams, which is really unfortunate. And so at a baseline to kind of protect yourself from some of those things is that, thinking about, what is a normal expected like onboarding to a job like, right? And things like, red flags to look out for is like if they're asking you to like buy things or pay for things before you start, or like all this stuff, like, those are some, common scams that are out in the industry right now, in terms of like, hey, if you buy this first and then submit a credit and like all this stuff, and like, those are some unfortunately like common scams that are out there. In terms of like the company itself, I would, figure out your kind of like your own checklist as a like, what's your kind of due diligence to say, okay, I'm going to look at this company's website, their Twitter, their GitHub, their Discord, their Telegram, right? I'm just going to go to those to just like see what the quality of the conversation is, see if other companies are engaging with them, see what like the age of the company is, and try to start walking through those. And the more that you do that, you're going to start building your kind of own mental model around what to look for. And a good way to start is like find companies that you do know are legit, like Calyptus, Coinbase, Chainlink, Kraken, go to some of these websites to like see what does their website look like, what does their GitHub look like, what does their Discord look like, what does their, user flow look like, and kind of use that as the standard, right? And say, okay, if this is what a reputable, long-running company in the space looks like, when I then am interviewing with smaller companies, what should I expect, right? And start to make those judgments. And if, again, use your network to say like, hey, I'm interviewing this company. Have you ever heard of them? And they're like, oh, never heard of them. Like, let me look at them. Like, kind of weird, right? Or it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of them. Like, yeah, I know we've worked with them in the past. Like, seems like a pretty cool project. It's like, okay, cool, right? So use your network, kind of have your checklist of like due diligence stuff that you do, like that you might be doing for prepping for an interview, but comparing that also to like known players in the space is a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. I'd second kind of using your network, and then using platforms like Calyptus that have relationships with a lot of companies in the space, to see who they're working with and what those websites and those processes look like, before delving in. with the other projects. But Matt, we are up on time. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was a really insightful session. I hope that everyone at home enjoyed it. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be back soon.
Nice, awesome, great chatting with you today, and there's looking forward to more conversations in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.